Welcome to War Always Changes, otherwise known as WAC. Today I want to answer the question of if National Guard or motorized infantry are better. Local paramilitary militia or fully trained infantry? Which one should you choose? This is, of course, in the scope of Conflict of Nations World War III, the fairly epic online multiplayer strategy game. A quick thing I would like to say is that this game does get updated fairly regularly, so the stats on these units might be slightly different in the future. Another thing I would like to highlight is that I will be looking at the Eastern Doctrine units just for example's sake. Let's start with motorized infantry, otherwise known as 11 X-Ray in the US Army. They are rough, tough, and perfect for assaulting cities with the support of armor and air defense. They are quite expensive, and in exchange are stronger and eventually get the ability to carry mortars for a ranged attack. They are the default for many players in Con, and are what you should go with if you are new to the game. Now let's discuss National Guard a little bit, unofficially known as Nasty Girls in the US Army. National Guard are perfect for homeland defense due to their quick mobilization speed and cheapness. But the big brain players out there more often use them to scour the countryside of the enemy nations and flood their borders and cities with waves of throwaway soldiers. Unfortunately, due to them being innately weaker than any other soft or armored unit in the game, they do take quite a bit of skill to successfully use. Let's quickly cover the basics of both units, then delve into the details of their stats. Starting with motorized infantry. As stated before, they are stronger than National Guard in just about every way. Max level infantry even get mortars so that when your troops are running around the enemy nations while you sleep, they can indirectly attack the enemy if the enemy does not have any artillery or patrolling aircraft to counter. Drone attacks are also an option you have for defense, same as the National Guard. One severe downside, however, is that apparently infantry are much more adversely affected by different terrain types. They suffer a 25% damage debuff in mountains and jungle, and a 25% damage and defense debuff in Arctic terrains. This is absolutely huge, and for some reason, the National Guard do not suffer from this trait. Moving on to the National Guard, they are cheap and weak. One staple of this unit is that health upon mobilization will be dependent on city morale. This can be especially bad in later stages of the game if you are at war with many nations. This can be negated with high-level hospitals and bunkers, and has never been an issue for me personally. Other than the lack of mortars and what we have already covered, National Guard can still fulfill the roles that infantry can. You just have to be smarter about it. The last thing to mention on this unit is that they do have a 25% defense buff on open ground and forest, and a 50% defense buff in city and suburbans. If we look at the stats of these units side by side, we can get a real good look at the cost and power of these units. As you can see, infantry are better overall if you don't mind a little bit of collateral damage, higher cost, and significantly higher mobilization times. The difference in power starting off is quite apparent, which is why the infantry you start with in your cities are so useful early game if you want to go for National Guard. As the levels progress, the gap closes quite a bit in terms of cost and attack, but of course, the mortar is now usable by infantry. One interesting note to make is that National Guard can be made so much quicker that you can easily make 2 of them in the time that it takes to make 1 infantry. So while it costs more to get an advantage, you can do it so much quicker. And then you have the option to split up and take land at twice the speed. Now let's take all of this into account and see what unit is better for Conflict of Nations. In order to decide, you cannot look at just stats. You must also look at how you personally play the game. In Con, you can be better than other players in a number of ways. You can have the most researched troops and have the more powerful stacks. Another way to get an advantage is to be incredibly active by playing on your phone, or your work, or school computer. But the best way to get an advantage is to use strategy. but the best way to get advantage is to use gold. In my opinion, this is why National Guard are better than motorized infantry, because you can make up for their lack of power with the application of time and skill. Think about it. Most of the provinces in an enemy's nation will not be occupied, as they will have most of their forces stationed in cities for defense. As a result, if you have National Guard, you'll have more troops by default, anywhere from 2 to 2.5 times the amount. So you can take land at twice the speed, and then rally your troops together at cities for combined attacks. What about mortars? To that, I have a cheap and simple counter: towed artillery. They will always have more range than mortars, and can be airlifted immediately, unlike many other units. While you certainly do have to be wary if the enemy is online, because they can easily attack you directly, the majority of time, stacks of National Guard, anti-air, and artillery works pretty good for me. Motorized infantry are better in most ways, so if you are new to the game, or if you anticipate having access to huge amounts of resources, it's always a solid bet. Another thing to mention is that you will naturally get access to the infantry officer if you research infantry, but if you are going the other route, you'll have to waste some resources researching both, or you could just not use the infantry officer. But if you plan on researching SPGs, towed artillery, or rocket artillery anyway, and are confident in your skills, National Guard is a great way to go. Take land twice as fast, produce troops twice as fast, win twice as fast. Maybe. I appreciate you sticking till the end, and if you enjoyed these deep dive videos on Conflict of Nations, stick around because there is likely more to come. And remember, war always changes.